You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers. Again, we're free and available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. Locked On Sooners is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Oklahoma Sooners had a players-only meeting on Monday. And listen, when things are down bad, you kind of have to find a way to circle the wagons, no pun intended, Sooner fans, and figure some stuff out. Some of what happened on Saturday was, especially in that second quarter, when things started to go bad, they started to unravel for Oklahoma. They unraveled both offensively and defensively. And after halftime, things were a little bit better. They were a little bit more under control. Things didn't really improve offensively, but they weren't hurting themselves on either side of the ball. The tackling, for the most part, got better. They were a little bit more locked in. They didn't really give up they gave up the one big pass play on the throwback wide receiver throw. But other than that, like, it seemed like it improved, but that second quarter really sunk you when you give up 21 points off 2 turnovers and a big long touchdown drive. That hurts. It hurts bad. And so, the players, they've got to rally. The coaches can only say so much. The coaches can only harp on them so much. The players have to take ownership and be responsible and accountable to their performances. I mean, it wasn't all bad. I mean, that first quarter, it's 3-0 Oklahoma, and in large part because the defense is playing awesome. The defense is keeping Quinn Ewers off balance. The defense is, stopping the run. They're tackling well. They're, putting themselves in a really good position to get off the field. They're getting off the field on third down. I know Quinn Ewers missed some throws on wide open guys, but that was a lot of because of the effective pressure that Oklahoma was getting from their defensive front and their linebacker core on the blitz. Like, some of that was because of Oklahoma's defense. They were affecting Quinn Ewers. They were getting him off his spot, making him throw on the move. And when you don't have your feet settled under you, or you're under pressure, sometimes you're going to throw and it's going to be a bad throw. And so as much as, Texas fans want to talk about how Quinn Ewers wasn't healthy and he, had bad footwork, blah, 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 good pressure creates bad footwork. That's just football, right? That's why the New York Giants were able to affect Tom Brady in 2 Super Bowls, because of their really good pressure, especially up the middle. Good pressure affects footwork, creates bad footwork. So, it wasn't all bad against Texas. It was a lot bad. You didn't win the game. You got blown out again. At the same time, there's a little bit you can build off of, and hopefully you can rally from coming up this week against South Carolina, because again, you're going to have a different kind of quarterback, a more athletic quarterback, someone who's going to be able to hurt you with his legs and can throw on the move, but he's not as good as Quinn Ewers. Lenora Sellers is not as good as Quinn Ewers, and the South Carolina team is not as good as Texas. But we've seen the South Carolina team can beat good teams if we're not careful. And Oklahoma is not necessarily a good team. So Oklahoma can certainly get beat, even though they're coming into this one as favorites. Not really. They're kind of actually more underdogs. If you look at the line, it's Oklahoma -2.5. But when you play at home, Vegas typically gives you 3 points for being the home team. So if you want to look at it as a neutral site game, Oklahoma would be a 0.5-point underdog going into this game. So all things being equal, go into this one thinking Oklahoma's the underdog because they're kind of playing like the underdog. Everything's got to get better. Everything does. There's not one area that you can look at and be content with. I think there are certain players, individuals that are playing good football that you can be happy with their development. We talked about some of those on yesterday's show. Zion Kearney, Eli Bowen. I think Jaden Jackson's playing well. Grayson Halton, I think, is playing well. I think we're seeing good things out of the linebacker core still. I thought that, Robert Spears-Jennings, he kind of got lost on some tackling stuff, but overall played fairly well. I think your leadership needs to step up and play better. Your Danny Stutzmans, your Billy Bowmans, I think the offensive line has to continue to get better. I was looking at some stats yesterday for an article I'm working on for Sooners Wire. And I mean, here's where Oklahoma ranks offensively. They're number 125 in total yards per game out of 134 FBS teams. They're 101st in rushing yards per game, 123rd in passing yards per game, 118th in first downs per game. They're averaging just 3.4 yards per carry on the season. That's 114th among FBS teams. SB Plus over at ESPN likes Oklahoma's offense a little bit better. They're 59th in the nation, but that's not good. That's not up to expectation for Oklahoma. For Oklahoma, you expect to have at minimum a top 20 offense. Pro Football Focus, in their grading system, that they try to use the film to help influence their grades. Oklahoma is number 128 out of 134 FBS teams. They're 128. That's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Max Olson shared that Oklahoma's offense lacks explosiveness. On X yesterday, he talked about how they have the second fewest plays of 20 yards or more this season. Only 13 plays of 20 yards or more, which is 133rd in the country. It's not good. But like I said, earlier, it needs to be less about explosiveness and more about efficiency. Efficiency, will create explosiveness. If you're efficient, if you are hitting the easy things, if you're hitting the 5-yard run, if you're hitting the 4-yard run, if you're getting the short passing play for a first down, if you're creating first downs, the explosiveness will come. It's Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you build your offense and it is efficient, if you have an efficient offense that's able to move the ball, explosive plays will come. You can't live and die on explosive plays. They're high risk, either because it's going to be an incompletion or it's going to be a interception or whatever. You can't just say, hey, we're going to get more explosive plays. That's like saying you're going to get more turnovers. Obviously, you want more turnovers. Obviously, you want more explosive plays. But if that's your game plan, that's not enough. Because if the explosive play is not there, then it's not there. But if you create an offense that gets you 5 yards a play, 6 yards per play, and then you hit an explosive play, or you're throwing a pass play for 10 yards and the receiver is breaking a tackle and going for 20, or your running game is creating a 20-yard run for you, that's great. But the explosive plays, again, are more than just throw the ball downfield, let's get a completion. Those are hard. Those are hard to complete, especially for this Oklahoma offense. And so we've got to create more efficiency, got to build out an offense that's going to make things a little bit easier on your quarterback, that's going to try and take advantage of some of the speed that you've got on the outside in a Brennan Thompson, in Zion Raggins, Jaquaze Petaway, JJ Hester. Take advantage of a guy like Zion Kearney, who's got some really good after the catch ability, from his time in high school. He's shown a few things so far this season. Again, he led you in receiving against Texas. The true freshman did. So get the ball to your guys in space, whether it's on a screen play, a drag route, a little crosser, something that allows them to try and make a guy miss and move the ball upfield. Trying to throw it 15 yards down the field, right now we're not connecting on those. We're not finding the open guy on those, if there's an open guy. We're not hitting on our deep, the deep attempts, or we're not taking as many deep shots as we need to be taking to try and soften up the offense. The run game has to improve. You can't average 3.4 yards per carry at Oklahoma and be content with it. Again, some of that is the sacks they take in, that gets averaged into that, but a lot of it is just your run game's just not been efficient. Against Texas, let's look at it real quick. Against Texas, Javonte Barnes averaged 2.7 yards per carry. Gavin Sawchuk a little bit better, 2 carries for 9 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. Taylor Tatum, 2 carries, 17 yards, 8.5 yards per carry. Oklahoma averaged just 3.7 yards per carry against Texas. Not good enough. It's not. They only made 8 missed tackles forced. They only made Texas miss 8 tackles. Not good enough. And had just 2, 3, 4 plays of 10 yards or more. But they also had 2 fumbles, right, in the run game. Taylor Tatum had one. Michael Hawkins had one. Again, true freshmen. They're going to get better. They're going to learn from it. But you got to have more. Everything has to improve. Defensively, they have to be more consistent tackling. You can't have a quarter where you just decide you're not going to tackle anymore. Defensively, I mean, there's guys that just don't need to be on the field right now. I don't know if Woody Washington is still hurt and injured or what, but man, he's struggling. I thought Billy Bowman played one of his worst games as a Sooner. He might have graded out well according to Pro Football Focus, but he just overran so much in the run game. It just wasn't good. It wasn't good. Texas, from that second quarter on, kind of did whatever they wanted to do offensively against the defense. And, we talked about it. So much was said about how Tennessee pulled back in the second half against Oklahoma. Texas kind of did the same thing. And Oklahoma's defense didn't really have to do as much. So, like, as much as the defense is what we're hanging our hat on right now with Oklahoma, they've got to play much, much better. They've got to play more consistently. And they've got to be the unit that is your strongest unit. You can't go a whole quarter and just decide not to tackle. They had 15 missed tackles. That's not going to be good enough. That's not going to be good against South Carolina, who, again, has some really skilled offensive talent. But you also have to have an offense that can score some points. Because if you don't have an offense that scores points, honestly, it won't matter how good your defense is, because you could lose 3-0 against South Carolina. And I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying that unless the offense improves, it could be one of those kind of games. The Oklahoma Sooners fell out of both polls. We'll talk about what it means coming up next here on Locked On Sooner.